Hello, everyone. We're talking today with Kim Nicol. Kim is a life coach, mindfulness teacher, and host of the New Manager podcast. Today, we're talking about the importance of self-advocacy. Self-advocacy is really nothing but asking for support for things to get better for yourself. It is very simple, and yet most people struggle with it. Today, my guest is going to help us figure out some tips and tricks to find our voice and ask for support. Hello, I'm your host Dorothy Mashburn, and welcome to Salary Negotiations Made Simple. Here I show you how negotiating does not have to be overwhelming. I break the entire process of negotiating into easy-to-learn steps that you can use in any salary negotiation situation, whether you're starting a new job or preparing to ask for a raise. Expect to receive practical, actionable strategies that are based on real-life experiences. I'll be sharing tips that have been proven to work, where professionals like you have netted anywhere from $10,000 to $75,000 more in compensation. It's payment for the skills you already bring, so you need to know how to ask for payment for that value. Are you ready to learn how to boost your earnings? Let's dive in. Hi, Kim. How are you today?
Hi, Dorothy. I'm doing well, thanks.
Awesome. I'm so glad we were able to align our calendars and have you come to the studio.
Me too. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. But do you mind starting us off with a little bit of an introduction of who you are, what you do, and how do you help?
Sure. So my name is Kim Nicol. I am a certified coach, and I work with people at the intersection of life, career, and leadership. So I offer one-on-one coaching. I have a podcast. I do a group program to help people with those things.
Very nice. And how long have you been doing it? And who are some of the people you've helped? Any stories there?
Oh, I mean, so many different things I could share. I came into this career around 10 years ago. And then around 2016, I got very interested in supporting people at the career stage of their journey as they're just starting to move into leadership, because I saw so many people that were not getting a lot of support as they were becoming new managers, emerging leaders. So many people were having to figure it out for myself or for themselves. I had to figure it out for myself when in my prior career. So I started doing more teaching and classes for new managers. And what's interesting is that initially I was teaching in person in San Francisco, which is where I live. So I had a lot of folks from, industries that are very prominent in San Francisco. What's been interesting is over the last couple of years, as I've gone, as we've all gone more virtual, I've just really come to see how much these topics resonate in every industry. Like especially the new manager and the leadership conversations, they show up in every industry. Any place two or more people are working together, so many of these questions come. So one of the things that I'm excited to share and talk with you about is the part about self-advocacy, how to speak up for yourself. It's definitely a skill that a lot of us have to learn, and helping people feel more confident in doing that is something I coach my clients on quite a bit.
Yeah. And that is so important, right? Can you tell us, like, as somebody who comes in as a new manager, what are some of the reasons people don't necessarily speak up for themselves?
Oh my gosh. So one of the big things I see, because a lot of the folks who work with me are very self-reliant, very high achieving, very much like I'll figure it out on my own. A lot of them have grown up with the thought you're just supposed to make do with what you have. So there's first that thought of, oh, I'm not supposed to ask for help. I'm not supposed to ask for more. I don't want to seem ungrateful, right? Like a lot of that is kind of built into a lot of the mindset. And what's tricky is it's served, like it can serve you really well for a long time. especially when you're an independent and individual contributor, right? It's like, okay, my job is just to like do this job. But what happens when you start to, especially go into leadership roles is that often part of your work will be advocating and speaking up for others, but we overlook and forget to do that for ourselves. So often it's the awareness of, I didn't even know I could ask for something or I could ask for more. Sometimes it's the fear of, will it look bad if I'm asking for something? Like either will they think I'm somehow not capable that I'm asking for more? Will they think I'm greedy because I'm asking for more? Will they think I am ungrateful because I'm asking for more? There's a lot of that has to get sorted through. And I'll tell you too, like I know you do so much talk and helping people around self. So if the only time you think to speak up for yourself is at a salary negotiation, you will not have very much practice because we're typically not having that conversation all the time. And there are so many other places in your career where you can start building that strength and that muscle of learning how to ask for things, right? Not just in salary, but actually practice with other things before then, right? And I'll give you actually just like a very simple example. This is something that one of my followers shared with me. And when she started working from home because of the pandemic, she realized she didn't have the same setup at home as she had at the office. And specifically, she didn't have a proper chair. And she said, I like my body just did not feel supported with the chair that I had. And she said, I'm also like a very tall person. And so like a regular chair just doesn't work for my body. And she thought initially, like, I'll just have to suffer. It's not a big deal. I don't want to make a big fuss about it. I don't want to be difficult. But then she realized, you know what? Maybe HR would be happy to provide me with a chair. And if I ask for a chair, it will actually help me do my job better because my body will be supported. I won't be, in pain. Like it will actually have a positive effect in my work. And so with that mindset shift, she wrote to HR. She said, hey, now that we're working from home, I'm wondering if there's any budget for home office. I would like to have a chair that actually fits me. And HR was like, of course, no problem. We'll ship one right out to you. So for her, it was kind of this big awareness of, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize it was actually not a big deal. And it was available, but she still had to ask for it.
Yeah. And it's a shift that she had to make. It wasn't a natural thing for her to ask for that.
Yeah, which I totally get. Yeah. Right? Like,
yeah,
totally get it.
Absolutely. There was a point that you made about, what sort of the what got you here won't get you there kind of a concept when you said that individual contributors are doing this. So what are some of the tips and tricks to change that mindset from doing everything to start advocating for yourself and then start advocating for your team?
Yeah. So one of my favorite things, especially as you're starting to realize, oh, this is actually a skill that I want to have. Because the one other thing that is interesting is I believe studies have shown that it can be easier to advocate for others than for yourself.
Right.
Right. So sometimes that's like the super hardest thing. So number one, realizing that is, especially if when I'm a huge advocate of, you want to ask for professional development dollars. Mm-hmm. So if there's a class, a coach, a workshop, something that you want to take that will help make you better at your job, your work might already have budget set aside for that.
Yes.
Right. And it's such a normal thing to talk about, especially in the context of performance reviews. If when you're talking to your manager about your career aspirations and your ambition, it just is a normal thing to talk about. It's not weird. It's not greedy. It's like a very normal thing.
Yep.
And so that's such a great thing that you can do. You like, no matter what level you are, even if you're, still early in your career, you can still introduce that conversation. Hey, like, I'm curious to know, what is the professional development budget like here? What do we
Mm-hmm.
have available for our professional development?
Right.
And your manager might be delighted to approve of dollars to be used for your, continuing learning and development.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point, and that's one of the things in specifically salary negotiations that we talk about is maybe there's no budget in the salary bucket of a budget, right? But there's always, generally speaking, a lot of budget left over in the professional development bucket. So you could ask for, hey, I want to go take this conference or learn this skill or this leadership training or work with this coach, and it can come out of that budget, and nobody even bats an eye for that.
Absolutely. Because number one, if there's budget for that, it has to be used. It's actually
Yes.
bad if it's allocated but not used.
Mm-hmm.
It can also make your manager look good,
Yeah.
right? Because then your manager gets to put in their performance review. Hey, I approved of my staff to get this training as they requested.
Yes.
So it can reflect well on them. It signals, like a leadership mindset that you're taking control of your career trajectory, like you're taking personal responsibility for that. So that's a positive thing. And your manager might not have the resources or the authority to approve of a raise or a bonus or a promotion, but they might have the authority to approve of, a conference or a workshop or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's a topic that I think a lot of people don't realize might be available
Mm-hmm.
if they don't ask.
They won't get it, right?
Yeah, so
That's
you
the
have
thing.
to ask.
You have to ask.
Exactly.
Yeah. One of
Mhm.
the things that's kind of you're starting to touch on it, and I want to pull that thread a little bit, is you're talking about, high achievers or, people who are, movers and shakers in their companies are leery of asking for help. And tied into that is investing in themselves, right? In maybe it's coaching with someone like yourself. How are you, what roadblocks or limiting beliefs are there in these individuals that prevent them from sort of taking that step and working with a coach or someone that helps them?
I think sometimes if you're just used to being self-reliant, if you're not used to feeling like there are resources available, and I will share too, so many of my clients are either underrepresented in their industry.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that sense of comparison and feeling like they always need to work twice as hard to get the same amount of recognition. And some of my clients also have an immigrant background, either first or second generation. And so there's also in the family culture sometimes this message of there actually is nothing else for you. Like you just have to be scrappy and self-reliant, and you just need to figure it out on your own. And that can be a really effective survival strategy. But we sometimes forget that it doesn't have to be the only strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not self-reliant or, the fear of, well, what if I ask for something and they say no?
Yeah.
But it can be like this awareness of, oh, I know how to be really self-reliant. And I also know I don't have to be.
Yeah.
I can actually tap into more resources and more support. And that might feel weird if you're not used to that.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my coach friends talked about this, and it's a little bit of a stretch, but when you have a cold, right, you don't try to Google it and YouTube it and try to figure out what's wrong with you. You go to a specialist, right, to get a diagnosis, get medicine. It's the same thing in a way, maybe not as extreme, but with like getting coaching and investing in yourself, it's that you can get a lot further faster if you get the specialist in versus trying to figure it out and trying to do it all yourself and trying to be everything.
Yes. And I think that also though it's such an important distinction too, because if you're also used to feeling really proud about being a hard worker,
Yes.
right? Like if your identity is really wrapped into this thought of like, I'm a hard worker, I work hard, that's okay. But that's also an easy way to overwork and to kind of keep yourself, like not in a good place,
Yeah.
right? Like you want to
Yeah.
know how to work hard, but you also want to know when is that not actually what's required here? Like we don't need you to overwork. We don't need you to suffer unnecessarily. It's okay
Hmm.
to let things be easy.
Yeah. Yes. It's okay to let things be easy. Yes. That's a hard lesson. And I'm a first generation immigrant, right? So it took me 20 plus years to really believe that, because it's the mentality of, if I ask for help, then I'm less than, or my identity is tied around hardworking, scrappy, resilient.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's needed, but it's not a requirement after a certain point.
Totally. It's interesting because so my mom is from the Philippines and she came to the US in her 20s.
Yeah.
And I've often asked her, like, how did you make such big changes in your life? Like, she
Yeah.
was really one who was doing things that there was no track record of in her family in
Yeah.
terms of education and then career and moving to another country. Like, I've asked her, how did you have the confidence to do that? How were you able to make such a big change? And one thing she always acknowledges is she says that she had so much help. Like she had emotional help. She had people who believed in her. That, she says her parents did not understand what she was doing, but they
Mhm.
believed in her 100%.
Yeah.
And so I think for her, it was interesting because I think in my family, I had both the role model of, yes, work hard. That's very important. Yes, get your education. That's a non-negotiable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also realize like there is help around you and you must also tap into that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then you can make even bigger strides than maybe you were capable of on your own.
Absolutely. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you too, like this is a little bit more personal, but it feels relevant. I
Yeah.
sometimes will think about how I am now in a position where I can have the support that my ancestors never had available to them,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like I get to make choices that were not available to them. And so it feels like also a way of honoring my
Hmm.
family lineage and my line, as opposed to, if there was a time where I thought, oh, I have to work as hard as, like my family line, or
Yeah.
I don't want to be, like the lazy kid, right?
Yeah.
I want to really honor and do right. And so for me too, it was this mindset shift of realizing, oh, I am honoring my
Yeah.
family and my heritage and my lineage because I'm able to, make different choices that they never
Hmm.
had the ability or the opportunity to make.
Yeah. Yeah. And they set you up to this, for all the work they did before
Mhm.
you. They set you up in this stage where you can make those choices. And if you do, then you're honoring that sacrifice or that hard work that they did.
Absolutely. And it
Yeah.
helps me feel connected to
Yeah.
family as opposed
Yeah.
to feeling like, oh, am I somehow being disloyal to
Yeah.
my family's values, right? Like
Yeah.
that's such a thing that I also see as we all have this, internal, many internal identity stories,
Yes.
and they have to all fit for us as individuals if we're going to do something that we're not used to doing, like
Mhm.
asking for, a salary that, you think like, oh my gosh, can I even ask for that? Right?
Yeah.
Who am I to ask for that? It's like, oh yeah, yes, actually, like here's why that's a very appropriate and equitable number. And
Yeah.
maybe they'll even be delighted, to
Yeah.
say yes to
Yeah.
that.
And it's interesting. One of the executives, we have men and women, because of course we need allies in our,
Mhm.
men leaders. And so one of the leaders actually said that, like, I value when somebody asks for more money, because I know if they're going to bat for themselves, they'll go to bat for my company. But if they don't even go to bat for themselves, then how can I expect them to, be this person I need them to be? So it's almost like the reverse is true versus what we're telling ourselves.
Yeah. And I think one of the other mindset shifts is, for so many of us, the first experience that you have of asking someone for something is when you're a little kid asking an adult for something.
Hmm.
And when we're in the workplace, sometimes that same feeling can come up, like you're asking someone in a position of power for something.
Yes.
And then you feel like that scared little kid, like, I hope they say yes. What if they
Yeah.
say no? And I find it's really helpful to help people remember, oh, this is a very different situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And, the sense of, oh, we can also think about the ask in a way that makes it easy for them to say
Say
yes to you.
yes. Yeah.
Right. They might want to say yes to you. They might need help explaining it up the chain if they need to get approval from, finance or like the person higher.
Mm-hmm.
But the mindset is different. And sometimes we just need to actively tell
Yeah.
ourselves, oh, like this is different.
Yeah. Very, very powerful. Like once we do that, the way we ask will change too, versus like that scared little kid who's asking for that cookie or whatever.
Yeah. Cause then
Yeah.
it's not like, hey, I hope I'm not bothering.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
like I was a really good girl and I cleaned my room and can I have a cookie now? It's just like,
Yeah.
hey, so here's what's going on and here's what I want to ask for. And here's why it makes total sense.
Yes.
What do we have available? What do you think?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's very powerful. One of the things you talk about in your posts and content is saying no, like the power of saying no and how it's a skill. Could you give us some idea on, why it's important to say no? How do you say no? And any tips around that?
Yeah, that's also really good when you're used to being self-reliant, a hard worker, when you feel like your value is in saying yes to everything and then making it work. That
Yeah.
is going to burn you out. That will turn you into the bottleneck. That will prevent you from delegating effectively and helping other people grow. So there are lots of reasons why, in the beginning of our career, it can be helpful to be like, yes, I'll figure that out. I'll do that. But you need to learn when and how to say no. So my first thing is I'm a huge fan of what I call the gentle no,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because often we think, oh, we only say no and it's going to somehow create a rupture in the
Yes.
relationship or it's
Yes.
going to now put us in conflict, right? But I like to remember sometimes we can say no in a way that actually makes the other person feel good. So
Mm-hmm.
for example, someone might, ask like, oh, can you come help me with X, Y, and Z? I love that you asked. No, I am not available.
Yes.
Right. It's like, I love that you asked me. And sometimes too, as a manager and at work, it is genuine. I'm glad you asked me because I want to be in the loop, because I want to support you. And you can still say no, but with a lot of kindness.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might offer an alternative, say, no, I'm not available, but let me see if I can find you another resource or another source of support.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's like, I'm not available today, but I will have half an hour tomorrow, tomorrow morning. If you want to find time, we can talk then.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes it is, offering an alternative. It doesn't have to be like a no, does not have to be a sword and a shield. Like,
Yeah.
no, it can actually be a door where you open it and it creates more possibilities.
Yeah.
And it can be a way of building trust. Like instead of
Yeah.
saying yes and feeling resentful or yes and feeling angry, it's like, oh, I'll just tell you no. You can ask me whatever you'd like and I'll just say no. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Takes the pressure off too, right? Like of
Mhm.
that, like, yeah, I'm forced to now I have to juggle 100 other things to make it work. So you're not as stressed. And then maybe you're a better employee because of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
have to, when you say no, should you provide apologies or should you provide reasons why, or is that not necessary?
I think it really depends on the situation. I think people tend to over apologize and over explain.
Yeah.
So, I think it depends, but also we tend to overdo it.
Yeah.
And it's okay to, simply let someone know clearly, directly, and kindly, oh, I am a no to that.
Yeah.
I love that you asked, but I am a no. And,
Yeah.
and here's what I would like to do as an alternative. I'm
Right.
actually thinking specifically of someone who took my workshop and she lives in Europe and she and her husband were going to go from their town to another country for like a long weekend or something. He wanted to take the train, very scenic, very beautiful. She did not. She wanted to fly. So he's like, why don't we take the train, from here to there? And she said, I am a gentle no, but I love that you asked. I'm going to fly and I'll meet you there. And he was like, what? She's like, yeah, it'll be great. And he's like, oh, okay.
That's good. And then once she's established that, she can always use the gentle no. I mean, that could become a vocabulary between.
Yeah. And what I loved about that was she didn't go into explaining like, oh, I don't want to. It's a hassle. You always like the train. I never like the train. She's just like, oh, I am a no. And here's what I'd like to do. And here's how it we'll still meet at the same time, but we'll just end up leaving our city at different times.
Right.
Yeah. And
it also gave him the opportunity to either join her or continue with the train trip like he wanted to. So it was kinder, gentler, and more respectful even.
Absolutely. Because what it does is when we have that gentle no, it allows us to still have a connection.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a rejection of the person. We're not, breaking the relationship. We can still maintain a really great connection with someone.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, we have to feel comfortable saying no. Because if we feel really prickly and scared about it, it's going to come off really tense and prickly and scary.
Right. Very true. Yeah. This kind of goes back to feeling comfortable in your own skin and being confident about why you're saying no.
Yeah, which also, we also learned as little kids that when we said no, there were often consequences. Right?
Yeah.
Grown-ups did not always like that. And on the flip side, if you're now an adult and you have worked or spent any time with small children, sometimes it gets tense when you say, okay, it's time to get dressed. And they say, no. You're like, okay, what do I do now?
Don't say no to me.
Exactly. So I think when we kind of remember that big context, it also gives a little bit of grace of, oh, it's okay if I never learned how to say no in a way that I felt safe, that I felt preserved a relationship and built trust. For a lot of us, that's not our early experience with no. Usually no came in with some kind of conflict, and it doesn't have to be a conflict.
Right. Absolutely. So what are some of the new manager tips and tricks that you provide or that new managers can take into consideration as they're coming into a new role? Any advice there?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I love that you asked. The first thing is to realize that managing people is a different job than the thing that you did before. So you might be a really great accountant, but managing accountants is a different job. You might be a really talented designer, but managing a team of designers is a different job. And I think just keeping that in mind will help you so much, because there are things that you will not realize you haven't thought about from that perspective. Kind of like how you can sit in the driver's seat, or not in the driver's seat, in the passenger seat of a car.
Yeah.
And you can see someone else drive and even have really strong opinions about whether they're a good driver or not. We do that with our managers. We're like, oh, my manager, right? But then when you become the manager, all of a sudden you're in the driver's seat and it's like, oh, this is a little bit different than I thought it would be. So give yourself that sense of grace to realize, okay, this is a new job. So there are some things I'm going to have to think about differently and try to understand, like what's really required of me. How do I measure success? Who do I need to be building relationships with? What does that look like? How will performance reviews work and when, right? So that we can get ahead of those and get a plan for those. So that's the first thing. And then the second, definitely ask if there is any training or coaching or any resources internally, because your organization might have them, but it might not be obvious. So always ask. And if they don't offer something, then you can bring the solution by finding a coach, a training, finding something and then asking, hey, I found this great resource that's going to help me, step into this new role. can we talk about professional development budget and what that can look like?
Yeah. Ask that, going back to that point of asking for help and seeking out that help to get ahead, right? For yourself and your team.
Yeah. Because also like being a new manager is not about having all the answers, right? Because sometimes the thing I see too is people will think, oh, I am now a manager. It must be because they think I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that's not actually it. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, they trust you to figure it out and to ask questions and to use the resources available to you. Right. So it's okay to do all of those things. And it's less about having the right answer and more about asking really great questions.
Yeah. One of my managers over the years had taught me, when you are a manager, you have to learn the fine art of letting go, like let your people shine. And that's a hard transition for a high achieving individual contributor. And one of the things that she said was, if you're doing a backstroke, right, on the swimming pool and you're like lying on your back, and the first time you do that, it's really hard because you're trying to flail and but if you just let go, you're floating. And you have to make that transition. Unless you do that, you'll constantly be fighting the water, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that analogy.
Yeah. Well, Kim, where can they find you for all this great advice? And tell us a little bit about where they can find you, our audience, and tell us a little bit more about your podcast.
Absolutely. So you can find me on the New Manager podcast. It's on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can go to my website, kimnicol.com. It's spelled KIMNICOL if you want to learn more about what I'm working on.
Thank you so much for your insights and advice today, Kim. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I'll link everything in the show notes.
Awesome.
All right. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining today, my friends. I hope you got a lot of valuable nuggets on investing in personal growth, learning to say no, and if you're a new manager, asking the right questions for outstanding team performance. Thank you for listening, and bye for now. If you're ready to rise up and get paid for your worth, be sure to get the free salary negotiation training at dorothyMashburn.com/fight for your worth. This is the ultimate step-by-step guide in order to help you secure a promotion or break the glass ceiling. Again, it's at dorothyMashburn.com/fight for your worth. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.